Different species have different mating systems, at least in terms of what you would consider the species typical pattern of reproduction for any given species. More often than not, there will be exceptions to any given mating system. You'll see individuals within a given species do things other than the accepted practices for that species. But nevertheless, there are certain standards, and that's what we're going to be looking at in this segment. So, one system is monogamy, and that is where a male and a female are bonded together. One male, one female, strong pair bond. Now, within monogamy, there are different forms. There is perennial monogamy, also known as permanent monogamy, where individuals mate for life. One male, one female for life. Of course, if something happens to either mate, then the other mate will typically try to find a new mate. But all things being equal, it will be a lifelong pair bond. Or seasonal monogamy, where the pair bond between a male and a female exists only within one breeding season, then they split, and then in the next breeding season, they'll find a new mate, but they'll be bonded with that particular mate within that next breeding season, and so on throughout the life cycle of the individuals. So, perennial or permanent monogamy, we see that in mute swans. That is the typical mating system for mute swans. And in many species, if not most, of geese and cranes. Notice we're dealing with relatively large birds here, certainly ones that don't migrate. And in mammals, we see it in gibbons, but it's relatively rare in mammals. Permanent monogamy, perennial monogamy, is relatively rare in mammals, and we'll come back to that later in this segment. What about seasonal monogamy? Well, this makes a great deal of sense. Small migrant birds, because they migrate, and so they're going to lose touch with their mates. So when they, the next breeding season comes along, they'll find a new mate and establish a pair bond with that individual within that breeding season. We also see it in seahorses. That's kind of interesting. In fact, the whole mating system of seahorses is kind of interesting. It's the male who gives birth. So the female deposits hundreds of eggs in a special brood pouch that the male has. He incubates them, and then they're born in about 21 days. They're relatively independent of the parent. Sometimes dad will hang around, see if he can offer some protection, but other than that, there's not a whole lot going on in terms of parental care after the time of birth. So here we have a male and a female. So the male is on the right, and he's showing his empty brood patch right there to the female. Well, she's not looking at the moment, but she will. And here she is laying her eggs in the male's brood pouch. So here we have the male, brood pouch is there, female's laying eggs. And there we have a seahorse developing within the pouch. There's hundreds of these guys. You can't see them all. But what do you say? I don't know if that's a pony, a sea pony, or what. I'll have to look up sometime what you call a baby seahorse, a young seahorse. I kind of like sea pony, actually. And here it is hatched. So it's come out of the brood pouch. There it is. They're all going to come spewing forth around the same time. And then there they are. They're hanging out, and they will grow up and develop. And here's a film showing that. Not great quality, but you can see what's going on. So there's our male. There's the pouch. And here they all come out. Like popcorn out of a popcorn popper with the lid taken off. And there they are. Now here's a species I bet you've never heard of. It's called the sea dragon. They are close relatives of the seahorse, but oh my God, do they look interesting. Both the male and the female, there's no sexual dimorphism here, as there's also none in seahorses. But check these guys out.
Spring in the sea off Australia. Below the surface lies a dedicated father, a weedy sea dragon. His outfit is unusual for a fish, with colours and dots and strange attachments. He's a cousin of the seahorse. When he finds his weedy sea dragoness, he joins her for a dance. As the evening progresses, she leads him on a slow waltz. In a graceful duet, each partner mirrors the actions of the other. They sweep and they wiggle. Darkness will soon draw a veil over the pair, but they will dance on into the night. Two months later, and the nature of what he was offering is revealed. After the dance, the female transferred all her eggs to him. Since then, he alone has cared for them. By embedding them in his tail and carrying them everywhere, he has kept them safe. And now they start to hatch. In the calm of a summer morning, a baby weedy sea dragon is born. Its yolk sac still attached. The babies shelter in the weed bed, now feeding themselves. Their success is thanks to a father that stayed around.
So no brood pouch there, but really interesting in terms of how he embeds them in his tail. There is, by the way, a little bit of sexual dimorphism there, but certainly nothing like what we saw in birds. The male's a bit darker, maybe a little more of that iridescent blue than the female has, but I wouldn't call that a striking case of sexual dimorphism at all. Anyway, both sea dragons and seahorses are also seasonally monogamous. Okay, the next major mating system is polygamy, where one individual is pair bonded to more than one. So there's at least two, and sometimes there can be more than two. It's subdivided, though, because it depends on the sexes. Which individual, which sex is paired with multiple mates, in essence. So two variations of polygamy. And unfortunately, one of these words sounds a lot like polygamy, and that would be polygyny. Polygyny is where a male has multiple mates. And again, there's pair bonds existing between each female and that particular male. That's more common than polyandry. There are some polyandrous species. That's where we have one female that's pair bonded with several males. And again, the strong pair bond exists between the female and each of those males, just like we see with polygyny, the same kind of strong pair bonds. So multiple mates. And this occurs successively, in other words, one mate after the other within a breeding season. And so what would happen is, so the male is pair bonded with one female, they split, then he's pair bonded with another, they split, and then another, and so on and so forth. Or the same with a female, pair bonded with a guy, they split, pair bonded with a new guy, and so on and so forth. Okay, within a breeding season. So it's successive or serial. The other variation is a harem, where a single individual has multiple mates at the same time. And that's much more common in polygynous species, in other words, male is bonded with several females, than it is with polyandrous. So let's look at polygyny. One male, multiple females. We see this in red-winged blackbirds, for example. So a male has multiple mates. Typically, the other mates will be neighbors. So he'll have a strong pair bond with his with the female on his own territory, but then he will also be somewhat bonded with females on neighboring territories. Okay, this is an interesting example where we have combinations of mating systems, though one of them is a bit of a stretch, as you'll see. This is a gray seal, and their primary system is simultaneous polygyny. Okay, so we have one male that basically has a harem, and what the permanent monogamy part of this is, and this is the part that's a little bit of a stretch because it's really not monogamy since it is polygyny, it's the same harem every year. So that's what DNA studies have found us. The male has a harem, that's the simultaneous polygyny, but it is the same harem year after year, and that's permanent monogamy, kind of, sort of, because it's the same females, but there are multiple females, so it's technically not monogamy. But I think you can see where, we get some weird combinations going on with different species. The gray seal. Okay, polyandry. That's where, again, we have one female that's pair bonded with multiple males. Not too many examples of that, but one notable one is the Jacana. It's a total swap of sex roles here. So it's the female that's the most colorful. She's the one who sets up a territory. She's dominant over the male. She's also larger than the male. And so the males are courted by the females. Okay, she's going to be courted. She's going to be courting a whole bunch of males, and the male chooses who he's going to mate with. And then the male incubates while the female goes off and mates with other males. So that's why it is polyandrous.
Baby lily trotters, jacanas, are also left in the charge of their father. Unusually for a bird, the female defends the territory and mates with 3 or 4 males, who build the nests and look after the broods. A strange female is trespassing on this breeding territory. There are eggs here, so the male should be nearby. He returns to protect them, but he seems to be alone. The intruder lurks in the weeds, watching him with interest. Finding a male alone probably means that his mate has been killed, and her territory and all her males could be up for grabs. He displays aggressively towards her, trying to drive her away. But female jacanas are bigger than the males, and she is not to be deterred. He is of no use to her while he broods another female's eggs. She starts to smash them, and he is unable to prevent her. They were on the verge of hatching. Having destroyed his brood, she now offers herself to him. And the bereaved male mates with the murderer of his chicks. Again and again she displays and induces him to mate with her. So she succeeds in getting rid of all the chicks that do not carry her genes and replaces them with those that do. One female with many mates is unusual. In most polygamous relationships, it's the male who has a harem of several females.
Okay, so that's the polyandrous jacana. This is an interesting combination of polygyny and polyandry. Wow. So it covers the whole spectrum of polygamy. This is a South American ostrich-like bird called the rhea. I mean, ostriches are found in Africa, but this is from South America. And a little bit smaller than an ostrich, but still very, very big birds. So the polygynous part is the fact that the male has a harem with up to 15 females, typically. And what happens is each female is going to contribute an egg every other day for 7 to 10 days, thereabouts, in his nest. So you might see something like this, and because, more eggs are being added by each of these females, you're going to end up with a pretty big nest. Lots of eggs. Fortunately, the males have lots of feathers to spread out to incubate the eggs, as you can see here. So there's a male that's actually incubating. So after he gets about 50 eggs, he's going to drive off the females. He will actually be somewhat aggressive toward them if they come by his nest. And he's starting to incubate, and at that point, no more females. And what's going to happen now is the females are going to go find another male. So that's the polyandrous part. So what this male is actually doing, I took these pictures so I knew what was going on. He's actually lashing out at that female, trying to drive her away. And she'll get the message and go off and find another male. So polygyny followed by polyandry. The female will now go, all the females will join another male, another harem. So, interesting combination, polygyny and polyandry. The eggs are huge, by the way, as you'd see in an ostrich as well. So there's a male about to incubate. And here comes a female. Uh-oh, not good. Not quite lashing out, but if she persists, he will. By the way, that's a threat display. This bird is threatening me. This is a photo I shot shortly before, like seconds before, this male charged me. And why did he do that? I got an egg from the nest. Incubation had just started. There was no embryonic development whatsoever. I still have this egg, by the way. There's no yolk inside. You get the yolk out. And I'm not... Actually, I was the one who did that. You actually... you put a little pinhole at the end of the egg, and once you start sucking it out without getting it in your mouth, that's pretty disgusting. It then pretty much flows out, and we filled up a huge container with it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff inside that egg, and I took it to the lab, and someone said they wanted to make a huge omelet out of it, and they did, and that's what happened. So there's my souvenir egg. And the male wasn't too happy, but he had a whole bunch of eggs. He could spare one. Well, the final system, if you want to call it that, is promiscuity. There are no pair bonds. Everybody is mating with everybody. No pair bonds with promiscuity, which is really what differentiates promiscuity from polygamy, because in polygamy, there's multiple matings, of course, but there are pair bonds between the males and the females involved. The porcupine is an interesting animal. It is promiscuous. The female comes into heat once a year, only for a matter of hours. It typically varies from 7, maybe a little bit less than that, to maybe up to 15 hours. So during this one period of time, there will be multiple matings with as many males as there are nearby. By the way, they're loaded with these quills. You might wonder, how on earth are they able to even mate? Well, she cooperates. There she is raising her tail. What you can't see is she's actually spreading the quills off to the side in the area of her vagina so that the male can gain entry without really messing himself up. But again, there's no pair bonds here, and then the next male will come along while she's still in heat, and so on and so forth. So porcupines are promiscuous.
They go from expected to extraordinary in the blink of an eye.
You're awestricken. They transform themselves to something that you've never seen before.
They swagger and serenade. They dance and display. They're unlike any creatures on Earth, and one of the most astounding phenomena ever witnessed. The birds of paradise.
So we've seen birds of paradise before in other segments. They are promiscuous. So are bowerbirds. Bowerbirds are really, really interesting. They do something unique. They build these bowers. And that's why they're called bowerbirds, by the way. And there's different species of bowerbirds. And they decorate the bowers, and they wait for females to come along. And if the female likes the decorations, she has to like the bird a little bit as well. And he does some interesting things with how he arranges those objects to create false perspectives and stuff like that. But I'm not going to get into that here. Nevertheless, if she likes what she sees, she'll mate with the guy. And if not, well, she'll go off and find another guy. There's no pair bond. She doesn't hang around. She mates and she's off.
This is its creator, the Vogelkop bowerbird. He has a passion for interior decoration. His hut, almost big enough for me to crawl into, is neither a home nor a nursery. It's a gallery in which he can display his artistic creations to visiting females. These flowers come from a creeper that has only just started to bloom. Great new material for anyone who likes colour. And he loves it. The iridescent wing cases of beetles also appeal to him, and he's amassed an impressive collection. But they're always in need of a little rearrangement to show them off to their very best advantage. He calls to invite female visitors. There are several such bowers in this part of the forest. 100 yards away, there's another one, built by another male of the same species who has a slightly different artistic sense. If a female decides that this is the best selection of jewels, then she'll mate with the owner.
Bowerbirds. Also, lekking species are promiscuous. So these are kind of unique. What we're looking at here is one lekking species. It's the sage grouse, found out west. And he is in the midst of doing a display on his lek. So a lek is sort of like this mating ground. It's an arena where a bunch of males will gather. They'll sort of fight it out in terms of finding an optimal position, or what they think is an optimal position on the lek. And then females will visit the site, choose who to mate with, and then they are gone. They are history. Nobody's hanging around. Total promiscuity. Here's a male displaying. And they're able to make that sound because of these sacs that they're inflating. And here is another video.
The males perform their raucous displays in early spring on a lek, a stretch of prairie reserved just for courting and mating. It's sort of a sage grouse singles bar. First, males compete for the best territories, where they can show themselves off to good advantage. Then, the females cruise the lek, comparison shopping to choose the male whose display they like the best. Females are very particular.
Now, there are 4 criteria of a lek in order for it to qualify as a real lek. There's no male parental care involved whatsoever. He only contributes sperm. Females are going to go off, build a nest, lay their eggs, take care of the offspring. Basically, we're dealing with a deadbeat dad, okay? Only sperm, nothing more than that. So that's one characteristic of a lekking species. And there will be what's called the lek. The lek is the arena for the females to visit. There'll be no other resources on the lek. Nothing. There's no shelter, no nesting sites, probably little or no food or water or anything like that. Only displaying males. And then she has the opportunity to select a male to mate with on the lek, on the arena. These are frigate birds. They too are lekking species and are promiscuous. So females are flying overhead, observing these males gathered together, all displaying, inflating their sacks, making that courtship noise. And there comes a female, and she's choosing that guy. But they'll mate, and that'll be the end of that. I'm showing this only because the angle of that bottom photograph, it's very heart-like, at least from that angle. So, yes, he loves that female, but only for a moment. What about humans? So I try not to bring too much human data into a course on animal behavior, because you have that in other courses. But I do want to say something about human mating systems. Here is an example of polyandry as the accepted mating system in this group of humans.
It's called polyandry, one woman, several husbands. It's an unusual arrangement. Today, polyandry only persists in isolated villages in the Himalayas. When it was time for Sunita Kumari to wed, her family, like many in India, made arrangements. But they involved more than a dowry and a celebration. Sunita has not one husband, not 2 husbands, but 3, all brothers. What must her life be like? Westerners might find the practice shocking, but for this community it works fine. One reason, sheer practicality. In the Himalayas, arable land is scarce, farms are tiny. If each generation divided each family's holdings, everyone would starve. Polyandry preserves the farm and the family's future. Unlike most men in India, husbands here handle domestic duties. They're willing to help with the cooking and childcare. In fraternal polyandry, a family picks a wife for its oldest son. The marriage can also include his younger brothers. They don't have to join in, but most do. Polyandry also functions as a form of birth control. No matter how many husbands she has, a wife can get pregnant only so often. If each man were to wed separately, the population here would explode.
I myself feel that common marriage is very good. I feel like everyone should live like our family. Even if we do not have anything to eat or drink, we sit happily, we live peacefully.
Sounds reasonable to me. Wouldn't work for me, though, because I'm an only child. A 1967 study was done by, I believe they were anthropologists, who looked at 849 human societies around the world, looking for the accepted mating system within each society, trying to arrive at an idea of, well, what could we call the species-typical mating system for humans? First of all, they observed no promiscuity as the accepted mating system. Obviously, promiscuity happens among humans. Just look at any college campus. Okay, so anyway, what they did find, though, was quite interesting. Polygyny. Most human societies are polygynous. One male bonded to multiple females, either at the same time or successively. A few were polyandrous, and then the rest were monogamous as the accepted mating system. Just giving you guys something to think about. Those are mating systems.